Chapter 28. Alaric observed the man for a few minutes. He was clearly doing his best to be stealthy and subtle and seemed nervous as well. After assessing the situation, Alaric decided on exactly what move he was going to make. It was a gamble, but he felt like the odds were in his favor. Although he had been a chopper pilot for his whole military career, he had made sure to train in various other military disciplines, and he knew how to sneak up on a person and ambush them. That training, combined with his experience stalking animals while hunting, meant that he was able to sneak right up to the man in the coat, and when he was right behind him, he moved with deadly swiftness, clamping a hand over the man's mouth with his left hand, and jabbing the barrel of the magnum into his ribs with his free hand. "Don't move. Don't scream. Don't try anything at all, you son of a bitch," Alaric growled, in quite a menacing whisper into the man's ear. "That's the barrel of a Magnum 44 sticking into your ribs, and I'll blow a hole the size of a baseball through your torso if you try anything. You got it? Not a sound, bozo. Not a single sound or you die." The man gasped, his voice muffled against the iron grip of Alaric's hand. "Are you going to try anything stupid?" Alaric asked. The man shook his head. "You're dead if you do," Alaric said in his best threatening voice. "Now, I'm going to remove my hand from your mouth, and you and I are going to have a quiet little chat." The man gasped, nodding vigorously. Alaric removed his hand from the guy's mouth, and a torrent of words immediately spilled out from the man's lip. Beneath the heavy coat he was wearing, he was a thin, balding fellow in his late 40s. "Pete, it's me, Jason Cobham. I ain't no outside looter. You know who I am. I know I'm breaking the rules, I know," he stammered, his voice reedy with fear. But Betsy has to have her medicine. She has to, and the rations aren't enough. She's gonna die in a few days if I don't get her some extra doses. Please, Pete, please, you know who I am. You know I'm no crook. I know what the rules are and why you guys set them up, but I can't sit by and watch my wife die. I can't." Alaric realized the man was a resident, and he clearly seemed to think Alaric was someone else, one of the members of the town patrols. He figured it would work to his advantage to play on this and pretend to be this Pete person the man thought he was. "Damn straight," Alaric said, his voice softening. "Look, the rules were set up for a reason. You and I both know that. But I've got the same problem as you see. The rations ain't enough for me either. I've got an infection that's getting worse, and I have to get some antibiotics, but they won't let me take them." "So you're here for the same reason I am?" Jason asked. "Yeah, I need to get some extra meds without the others knowing. Sorry about the whole gun in the ribs thing. I thought you were some outside looter," Alaric said. As long as the cloud stayed in place and kept the town shrouded in thick darkness, Jason wouldn't be able to see that Alaric wasn't the person he thought he was. "You do sound sick. Your voice is different from how I remember it when we last spoke a couple months ago," Jason said. Yeah, the infection's in my throat," Alaric said, adding a cough for emphasis. "So, I guess we can work together then?" Jason asked. "Since we're both breaking the rules here, as long as you don't say anything, I sure as hell won't. The guys won't notice a few missing meds. Nobody's keeping a strict count. Neil is in charge of it, but he's drunk so often he won't notice a damn thing." "I agree," Alaric said, glancing up and down the alley to make sure no patrols were approaching. "So let's quit jabbering about this and get on with it. Go on, get this door open. I'll watch for the patrol to make sure we don't get spotted." "Sure, of course. You won't say anything, right?" "Of course not, Jason. Now go on, get on with it." Alaric couldn't believe his luck, but he knew it would run out very quickly if the moon came out and filled the area with light. He glanced up at the sky while Jason continued to pick the lock, and worry flooded through him as he saw that the last of the clouds were being blown slowly but surely away from the moon. The area would be lit up in mere minutes. "Almost there," Jason said. "I knew those years of working at a locksmith would eventually pay off. And got it. In and out nice and quick," Alaric said. "As long as we both keep quiet about this, it won't be a problem for either of us." "I agree. I brought my gas lamp. Don't worry, though, I've covered it with a t-shirt so it doesn't give off much light. Just enough to see by, that's all." "Let's go inside and close the door before you light it up," Alaric said. The fact that Jason had a light worried him. As soon as the man saw his face, he would know that Alaric was an imposter. "One second thought," Alaric said. "I'll keep guard out here. You get me what I need from inside, okay?" Yeah, good idea," Jason said. Alaric told him the names of a few antibiotics, each of which the pharmacy would likely have, and then he stepped into a dark pool of shadow and closed the door behind Jason, praying that his accomplice would be able to get what he needed and give it to him before the moon came out from behind the clouds and exposed his act of deception. Glancing up at the sky revealed precious few clouds were remaining, and the wind was picking up. "Hurry up, man, hurry up," Alaric muttered to himself as he paced back and forth in the shadows, waiting for his accomplice to grab what was needed. It felt, however, as if Jason was doing his best to take his time. Alaric looked up at the sky again, and as he did this, his heart started to thump, and a cold sweat broke out across his forehead and in his palms. There was only one flimsy wisp of cloud remaining in front of the full moon, and already everything was growing lighter. "Come on, damn it, move your ass," Alaric hissed under his breath. He knew he would have to take drastic measures if Jason didn't emerge from the pharmacy in the next minute or two. Just as it looked as if the final remaining wisp of cloud would be blown from in front of the moon, Jason stepped out of the door and quietly locked it behind him. Alaric subtly shifted himself into a thick pool of shadow as the alley grew lighter, hoping that his features would remain concealed well enough that Jason wouldn't realize he was an outsider. "I got it, Pete. I got everything we need," Jason whispered excitedly. "Great," Alaric said. "Give me my stuff and let's split. Then we both forget this ever happened." Jason handed him 2 boxes of antibiotics. "There you go," he said. "You really do sound different. I hope these help your throat. It sounds bad." "Thanks," Alaric said. "Now get out of here and I'll do the same." At that moment, the final wisp of cloud was blown away, and bright silvery moonlight came rushing down from above, illuminating everything in the alley in a bluish tone of silver, including Alaric's face. A look of confusion came across Jason's face, a look that rapidly morphed into one of shock as he realized that Pete was actually a complete stranger. His jaw dropped, and he was about to yell out when Alaric's fist crashed into it. It was a perfectly placed and powerful punch, and Jason's head whipped to the side and his legs crumpled beneath him. Alaric lunged forward and caught Jason's limp body as it flopped to the ground. He didn't want to hurt the man any more than was necessary. He laid Jason's knocked-out body on the ground. "Sleep easy, buddy. I'm sorry about that," he said. "I had to do what I had to do, though." Leaving Jason to recover from the knockout, Alaric took off at speed down the alley, with the antibiotics tucked safely in his pocket. Getting out of the town would be a lot riskier and more dangerous than getting in now that the moon had come out. Alaric's heart was racing, and his senses were on full alert. But he felt positive he could do this. He could make it out without getting shot, as long as— "Raider!" Someone's voice screamed from a nearby building. "Patrols! There's a raider in town! Raider! Raider!" The voices of a nearby patrol yelled back, shouting that they were on their way. In a mere heartbeat, everything changed. Alaric had just been spotted, and now his mission to sneak out of town had become a hunt, in which he was the quarry. And now, with the full moon out bright and clear, there were precious few places to run or hide. Alaric took off at a sprint, no longer caring about stealth. Speed was all that mattered now, and if he didn't get out fast enough, he knew he would join the other raiders in the mass grave he had heard about earlier. "He's running down 4th Street!" a man yelled, as Alaric sprinted past a house. "Patrols! He's running down 4th Street!" The hunt was on. Chapter 29. "Back in the toy store, sweetie, back in the toy store," Sydney said frantically, grabbing his daughter by her arm as the men in black advanced, firing at anyone they perceived to be a threat. He yanked Valerie back into the store and swept her up into his arms, running for the back of the building. The teenagers who had been looting the video games and consoles dropped most of their illicit gains and also bolted for the rear of the store as the thunder of gunfire boomed and crashed right outside. "Let's get the fuck out of here," one of them yelled to his friends while stuffing video game boxes inside his jacket. Sydney didn't like the look of the teenagers, but he realized they weren't an immediate threat to him or his daughter, so he joined them in the back room, where they were trying to find an exit. They found the back door easily enough, but it was locked. "Open it up, man! Hurry the fuck up!" one of the teenagers yelled to his friend, who was frantically yanking at the handle but having no success. Outside, the sounds of gunfire were loud and harsh, and added a frightening tension to the already desperate atmosphere. Then came the sound of a bang, so loud that it shook the walls and floor of the back room. And right after it came a loud and protracted hissing. A tear gas grenade had just been tossed into the toy store. Soon enough, clouds of noxious gas started to billow through the door, to the front of the store, which Sydney hastily shut. The teenagers were in too much of a panic to figure out how to get the door open. The tear gas was partially contained, but the door wasn't airtight, and tendrils of the noxious fumes were creeping under the door and slowly building up into a cloud in the room. Sydney set down Valerie behind some boxes. "Stay here, sweetie," he said, "and stay away from those boys, okay? Just stay here and keep quiet. I'll be right back. If the gas gets in your face, take off your shirt and wrap it around your face, okay?" With teary eyes as wide as saucers, Valerie nodded. Sydney rushed over to the group of teenagers, who were frantically grabbing at the door handle and trying to kick the door open. "Stop! Stop!" he yelled. "I've got a better way to handle this. Help me here. I need 2 of you to help me with one of those gas canisters there. We can use it as a battering ram." He pointed to a corner of the room, where a group of large helium canisters used for inflating children's balloons sat. The teenagers realized that Sydney's plan made sense, so 2 of them ran over to the canisters with him and helped him pick up the largest one, which was around 5 feet tall and weighed over 100 pounds. They carried the canister over to the door, coughing now as the tear gas slowly but surely filled the room. And then Sydney coordinated their efforts to smash the door open. "We have to move together," he yelled. "Aim the bottom of the canister at the door handle. Are you guys ready? 1, 2, 3. They swung the canister into the door handle, and there was a thumping crunch, but the door held fast. Their eyes started to burn as the tear gas took effect. "Again!" Sydney yelled, coughing as the tear gas burned the inside of his nose and his throat. 1, 2, 3. Again they swung the canister into the door, and this time it gave a little upon impact, but it still remained closed. Tears were now streaming down everyone's cheeks, for the room was almost full of gas. "One more," Sydney gasped, choking and coughing, his eyes burning and his nose and throat on fire. 1, 2, 3. Once more they swung the heavy canister, and that time their efforts succeeded. With a loud crunch, the impact smashed the door wide open. The teenagers immediately bolted, leaving Sidney with the heavy canister, which he dropped, only just getting his feet out of the way before it smashed to the floor. He ran over to Valerie, who was crouched on the floor behind the boxes, coughing and weeping, with her shirt off and wrapped around her head, as he had instructed, without saying a word. The tear gas was affecting him too badly for him to speak. Sidney swept his daughter up in his arms and carried her out of the store. He didn't stop in the alley outside the back door. The sounds of firing and explosions were still terrifyingly close, and he could hear that the black-clad troops were now inside the toy store. Coughing and retching and feeling as if rusty barbed wire was being dragged through his throat, his nasal passages, and his eye sockets, Sidney stumbled down the alley with Valerie in his arms. Because she had used her wet shirt as a makeshift gas mask, she hadn't been as badly affected by the tear gas, but it had still gotten into her eyes, nose, and throat. And for a young child, the pain was unbearable, and she was weeping and wailing. "It's okay, sweetie. You'll feel better soon. You'll feel better," Sidney said, while coughing and choking, and stumbling through the alley, struggling to see, his vision blurred with burning tears. He heard the sound of boots and yelling voices in the alley somewhere behind him, and that gave him a fresh boost of adrenaline, on top of what was already surging through his veins, since he guessed it had to be the men in black. He didn't bother to stop or even glance over his shoulder. Stopping or slowing down could mean death for himself and his daughter. Instead, he sped up, his legs pumping madly beneath him, lurching and coughing as the lingering remnants of the tear gas burned his airways and eyes. Just up ahead was another alley, branching off this one, and Sidney veered into it, not caring where it led, as long as it got him away from the troops in black. The alley, however, only extended a few dozen yards before it stopped in a dead end, blocked by buildings on both sides and a 10-foot wall at the end. Sidney skidded to a halt, his heart booming in his chest, panic and confusion now churning in his skull in a terrifying storm of fear. The sound of boots in the alley behind him was growing rapidly louder, and now he was completely stuck, trapped like a rat, with no weapons on him but a wrist rocket and a BB gun. He set down Valerie and stepped in front of her, turning around slowly. "Stay behind Daddy, no matter what happens," he said. "And if the bad men shoot Daddy, fall down right away and pretend you're dead, okay?" "But Daddy," Valerie wept, bawling her eyes out. "Do it, Valerie," Sidney yelled. "Promise me you'll do it." Suddenly, a door in the building just to their left flew open. "Get inside. Here, hurry," a desperate voice yelled. Sidney didn't need to be asked twice. He grabbed Valerie and darted into the dark doorway, and as soon as he was inside, their mysterious savior slammed the door shut behind them and bolted it closed. "I heard a child crying," said the man, whose raspy voice sounded like that of an elderly smoker. "I couldn't leave a child outside, not with those monsters, those terrorists in black. I don't know if they'll try to smash the door open, but we better move. Follow me." "Thank you, sir. Thank you so much," Sidney gasped, his heart still hammering madly in his chest. "You just saved our lives." "Thank me later," the man said. "Now just move." The elderly man moved as fast as he could. He walked with a heavy limp, and snatched up a camping lantern he had set down nearby. When he picked up the light, Sidney and Valerie were able to get a better look at him. They saw that he was a short, slender fellow who looked like he was in his late 60s or early 70s. He was dressed in city sanitation workers' coveralls and had a kindly face upon which there were many deep lines and wrinkles. "It's a steel door," the old man said, as he led Sydney and Valerie down a flight of steel stairs. "But they might blow it open. I've been in here trying to get the damn pumps up and running since whatever it was shut them down in the early hours of the morning. I can't even get a hold of my boss in the department to tell him that it's impossible. Nothing is working. Every damn thing is dead. All of it. I'd just given up and was about to leave when all that chaos erupted outside a few minutes ago. I came straight back here because this, my friends, is the only safe way to get through the city now. As long as those damned terrorists aren't coming here to completely obliterate the pumps." "What is this place?" Sydney asked, his hammering heart finally beginning to resume a more measured pace of beating. Behind him, Valerie was still sniffling, and her eyes were teary, but she had stopped weeping. "Section C3 of the city sewage works," the old man said. "I've been working here the last 4 decades, and I've never seen anything like this. And with the pumps down, the city is going to have a very, very serious problem with human waste in short order. I'm talking outbreaks of cholera and the such that would kill thousands, tens of thousands, maybe even more in days. Most people don't know just how vital these pumps down here are for their health and well-being. Nobody thinks about where their you-know-what goes when they flush their toilets. Well, without flushing toilets, we may as well be back in freaking medieval times. I don't know what the mayor is going to do about this, but if he doesn't get some backup generators down here fast, we're going to have a serious health crisis on our hands." "It's gone way beyond that, I'm afraid," Sydney said. And he explained to the old man what had happened and what the full effects of the EMP attack entailed. By the time Sydney had finished speaking, the old man's face had gone pale. "My God," the old man murmured. "This is it. This is the end of everything. It's the end of everything. That's why I need to get to my wife and get my family as far away from this city, from any city, as possible," Sydney said. "And you, I'm sorry, but you never told us your name. You need to do the same with your family." "I'm Bradley," the old man said. "Just call me Brad. I don't have any family here. My kids live on the East Coast, and my wife passed 3 years ago. I don't really know where to go. My cousin's got a small place, maybe 10, 15 miles out of town, past the suburbs. He keeps bees there, grows his own crops and stuff." "Then you'd better go there," Sydney said. "Right away. These pumps will never run again, and neither will anything else in this city. Trust me on that." The old man nodded slowly, contemplating everything Sydney had just said. It's a lot to take in, you do understand." At that moment, the walls shook, and masonry dust rained down on them from above. The steel stairs vibrated beneath their feet. A massive explosion had just gone off, somewhere above them in the alley. "Move!" Sydney yelled. "We have to get out of here." This way," Brad stammered, his eyes wide and white in the light of the camping lantern. "We'll be safe for a while, I hope." He led them to the bottom of the stairway, which branched off into a number of tunnels, the concrete walls of which were lined with rows of pipes. Brad took Sydney and Valerie down one of the tunnels, and they soon found themselves walking alongside a sluggish, foul-smelling river of brownish-gray water. They were now in the sewers. "Do you know where we are in the city?" Sydney asked. "I know this place like the back of my hand," Brad answered. "I told you I've been working down here for over 40 years. "We need to get to the park near 7th Avenue, Sydney asked. "Can you take us there?" Brad thought about this for a while. Sure, I can take you there. There's a manhole that pops up in the street about a block from the park. That's about as close as I can get you." "And after that, we will be able to get out of the city via this sewer network?" "You sure can," Brad answered. "As long as none of those damned terrorists come down here, this is about the only safe passage out of the city, I would say. Would you be able to lead us out? Sydney asked. I've got money in my wallet, a few $100s, and... Brad held up his hand and smiled. I ain't gonna charge you, friend. I'm getting out myself, and I'd appreciate the company on the journey. And I owe you one. If you hadn't explained to me what was really going on with this whole EMP thing, I'd probably have waited around in the city until it was far too late, like most people will be doing. Thank you, Brad. Thank you so much, Sydney said. If you could get us to the manhole near the park and just wait for maybe 20 minutes for us. If we're not back by then, you can assume the worst and continue on your own. You don't want me to come up to the surface and help you find your wife? Brad asked. No. Thank you for the offer. But if you ended up getting shot and killed up there, we'd be totally stuck. We need you to stay alive so you can guide us out of here. This place is like a labyrinth. We'll never find our way out. Not without a guide. All right, I'll stay down here, Brad said. Anyways, let's get going. I don't think your wife is going to be too safe for much longer waiting around for you up on the surface. He led them through the maze of sewer tunnels, which were eerily dark and smelled worse than anything either Sydney or Valerie had ever smelled in their lives. The only light was Brad's camping lantern, and Sydney and Valerie had to stay close behind the old man for fear of being swallowed up whole by the darkness and stumbling off the narrow walkway into the river of filth alongside it. After around half an hour of navigating the maze of tunnels, Brad led them to a ladder. Up there, he said. This is it. Climb up out of that manhole and you'll be about a block from the park. Don't put the manhole cover back on until you come back with your wife. Those covers are impossible to lift from the surface. I'll wait down here in the darkness. I'll only turn the light back on when you come back. I don't want to waste precious fuel and don't want to attract the attention of any of those scumbags in black. Watch out for 'em when you're up there. Good luck, Sydney. I hope you find your wife. Thank you, Sydney said. Like I said, he continued as he climbed the ladder. If we're not back in 20 minutes, we're not coming back. Go ahead and save yourself. I pray that you make it back, Brad said. Sydney climbed up the ladder, followed by his daughter. When he got to the manhole cover, he listened intently to the sounds coming from above it. A few muffled voices were yelling from a distance, but there were no gunshots or explosions. It's now or never, Sydney muttered. He moved to open the manhole cover. There was a hinge attached to a powerful spring, which made opening the manhole from inside easy. Opening it a few inches, he peeked outside and saw the street was mostly deserted. Come on, sweetie, let's go, he said. He popped open the cover fully and then climbed out. Valerie climbed out behind him and then hurried down the street. As Brad had said, they were only a block from the park. Sydney's pulse quickened as he approached the park, which was eerily quiet. It was difficult to see much of it because of the clouds of thick smoke that hung like a black fog in the air. Would Jessica even be there? What if she wasn't? What if they had ultimately come all this way and endured everything they had for nothing? Those thoughts injected such potent nausea into Sydney's guts that he almost dropped to his knees and threw up in the middle of the street. Through sheer force of will, he forced himself to keep moving forward and to fight against the overwhelming feeling of nausea. When he got to the entrance of the park, though, a blast of terrible shock ripped through him and shook him to his core. For there, on the grass, he saw Jessica, and she was lying face down in a pool of blood. Chapter 30. Alaric paid no attention to the people screaming out that he was running past their houses. He couldn't afford to stop now that his cover had been blown. He zigzagged from shadow to shadow, for pools of darkness remained beneath the trees that lined the streets. But the entire town was now being roused by the shouts of the residents who had spotted, and were spotting, his rapid flight up the moonlit streets. The heavy, dead silence, which usually would have been displaced by the gentle, steady hum and buzz of night traffic, added a surreal and almost ghostly eeriness to the atmosphere. Despite the odds stacked against him and the imminent threat against his life, Alaric remained cool and calm, keeping the latent terror that was percolating in his guts at bay. It had been many years since he had left the military, but his combat training had been drilled into his muscle memory, and his experiences in live combat situations under enemy fire had given him a level of self-control under pressure that few civilians possessed. More shouts shattered the silence, and they were coming from behind him. But they were not yells from residents raising the alarm from the windows of their houses, where they were cowering in the dark. Instead, these were the shouts of a dozen armed men who were racing up the street in pursuit of Alaric. As strong and fit as he was for his age, he was no spring chicken, and he could tell that the men were gaining on him, even though he hadn't yet caught sight of them, nor they of him. What he needed now, he realized, was a diversion, an obstacle, something to throw in their path. If they got close enough to him to start shooting, his already low odds of surviving the next few minutes would drop even lower. Alaric knew it would take a miracle, or rather, some quick thinking and ingenuity, to get himself out of this deadly mess. And when he saw a large truck abandoned in the road ahead with one of its doors wide open, a plan popped into his head. He raced up to the truck, aimed his revolver at the fuel tank, and fired. The immensely powerful handgun blew a hole straight through the fuel tank, and gasoline started pouring out of the multiple holes in the truck's body. Now, with the patrol rounding the corner at the bottom of the street, only around 70 yards downhill, Alaric ran around to the driver's side of the truck and hopped into the vehicle. He stuck it in neutral, then released the parking brake, jumping out as the truck started to roll slowly downhill toward the patrol, who were running up the road. Gasoline was gushing all over the road from the punctured fuel tank, and the rolling trunk was creating a long, broad slick of the flammable liquid as it accelerated downhill. "There's the son of a bitch!" one man yelled. "Take him down, boys! Take him down!" Another fired his rifle at Alaric. The bullet sparked as it hit the road, mere inches from him. Alaric's heart was racing, but he kept his cool and whipped out his trusty lighter, and then knelt down and ignited it. He touched the flame to the edge of the gasoline slick, and with a tremendous whoosh, the entire slick caught flame. Now it wasn't just an empty truck rolling down the road toward the patrol. It was a truck gushing gasoline, with a wall of fire racing behind it. Alaric didn't wait to see what happened. The roaring wall of flames was enough of a barrier to give him the time he needed. He prayed to make his escape. So he turned around and sprinted up the road, while the men of the patrol yelled out shouts of confusion and panic, scattering in a chaotic mess as the massive projectile hurtled toward them. A few seconds later, the flames caught up with the truck, and the fire got into the leaking gas tank. A tremendous explosion ripped through the night, with a fireball billowing almost 50 feet into the air. Alaric felt the shock wave ripple along his back as he ran, but he didn't stop or slow down. The shock of the explosion had scattered the patrol for now, but they would regroup in minutes, maybe even under a minute. He knew he had to use this time to escape. He would not get another opportunity to do so. He saw the welcome darkness of the woods looming up ahead, and he vaulted over someone's picket fence, not caring that he would likely be spotted. Once he got to the woods, the patrol would be unlikely to continue pursuing him, because then the advantage would shift to him. He would be able to stalk them in the darkness and take them out one by one. Someone opened a window as he sprinted past and yelled at him, and they screamed out to the patrol to come to get him, but he didn't slow down. He fired a shot blindly over his shoulder, not hoping to hit anything, but just for the terror-inducing effect that the massive clap of the Magnum shot would have, getting anyone in the house to take cover and think twice before attempting to fire on him. The woods were just up ahead, and Alaric sprinted into the shadows under the trees at full tilt. Although the moon was out now, and everything was much brighter, many pools of black shadows remained in the forest. Alaric realized that he had to slow down for fear of running full speed into a low branch, or another such obstacle. So he did, and slowed down to a fast jog. Now that he was no longer barreling along at full pace, he glanced over his shoulder. While he could hear the enraged yells of the patrol and the chaotic screams of residents who had been frightened out of their wits by the huge explosion and the enormous fireball that had accompanied it, none of the shouts were nearby. A wave of relief rushed through Alaric. He realized the patrol was no longer pursuing him. He had gotten away. He slowed down to a fast walk, and only now, with the adrenaline dissipating from his system, did he start to realize just how much effort he had expended in his flight through town. His legs were feeling leaden, his feet like two aching concrete balls. His throat and lungs were burning, and his heart was beating so rapidly it felt as if it were on the verge of exploding within his chest. He had to take a moment to lean against a tree to try to catch his breath. Thirst gnawed painfully in his throat, and he would have killed for a sip of water, but he hadn't brought a water bottle with him. As badly as he needed to drink, it would have to wait until he got back to Harvey. "All right," Alaric whispered, rasping into the darkness beneath the tree. "Let's go. Let's do this. 1 foot in front of the other. 1 foot in front of the other." The hike through the dark woods back to where Harvey was waiting took longer than Alaric would have hoped. But there could be no hurrying. He had expended so much energy that he simply couldn't go any faster. To merely walk felt as if it required a Herculean effort. Finally, though, he got back to Harvey. For a few shocking moments, he thought that his friend had died. The researcher was sitting completely still on the ground, his head slumped over his chest. "Harvey," Alaric said. "Harvey, are you still with us? Harvey!" Harvey coughed and weakly lifted his head. "Alaric, you came back," he rasped. "I got the antibiotics you need. Here," Alaric said, taking out a capsule. "Take one." He helped Harvey put the capsule into his mouth, then lifted a water bottle to his lips so he could swallow it. Only after he had helped his friend did he finally take the drink of water for which he had been desperate for so long. Then he sat down next to Harvey, got out a small portion of food from their rations, and began to eat. "You're gonna be right as rain, my friend," he said to Harvey. "You're gonna be right as rain. Trust me." The two of them ate their meager rations in silence, watched over by the cold moon and starry sky above. Chapter 31. Sidney's legs felt as if they were about to buckle beneath him, and every muscle in his body felt as if it had turned to jelly. Such intense waves of shock and nausea tore through his body that he could not even breathe, let alone speak. Although the clouds of smoke made it difficult to see with perfect clarity, Sidney was sure the limp body lying in the pool of blood was that of his wife, and that body was quite obviously lifeless. Because of a small shrub blocking their line of sight, which Sidney could see over, but Valerie could not, his child had not yet seen the body.
"Why are you stopping, Daddy?"
she asked.
"Isn't this the park we're going to find Mommy in? Come on, let's go find her."
Stay here, sweetie," Sidney managed to utter. It didn't sound like his voice in his ears. He didn't even feel like he was speaking.
"But, Daddy..."
"Valerie," You stay right here, damn it, and don't move. Don't move an inch, do you understand me? Sidney roared, his voice vociferous and hoarse with surging emotion. Valerie had never been yelled at like that by her father, and his furious tone was so shocking that she simply stood rooted to the spot, her eyes wide and her mouth hanging open. She wanted to cry, but she was so taken aback, she couldn't even do that. Sidney had to make sure that what he was seeing was real, that it wasn't some terrible illusion or a hallucination conjured up by his troubled and exhausted mind. He left Valerie on the sidewalk and began walking briskly toward the park, making a beeline for the corpse. His walk soon broke into a run, which quickly accelerated into a sprint. His heart was booming in his ears, and his stomach was churning, with a bitter taste of rising vomit returning to the back of his throat. He ran into the park, his eyes locked on the terrible sight, his heart not wanting to believe what he was seeing, but his brain telling him that he had to accept this awful, crushing reality.
Sidney! Sidney! Oh my God, you came! Sidney! Sidney!
Sidney stopped dead in his tracks, overcome with shock and disbelief. It couldn't be. Yet it was. It was Jessica's voice. He slowly turned around to face the direction from which her voice was coming, and he saw her running toward him. She was dressed only in her jeans and a bra, but she was safe and alive. "Jessica!" he gasped, still utterly floored with disbelief. "Jessica! Jessica!"
"Where's Valerie?"
she screamed, stopping dead in her tracks before she got to him, her voice rising in pitch with panic.
"Where's my little girl? Where is she?"
"Valerie!" Sidney yelled. "Come here, quickly! Come here, sweetie!" Valerie saw her mother, burst into tears and ran, weeping toward her parents. Jessica, meanwhile, ran over to Sidney and threw her arms around him, hugging him more tightly than she ever had before. Then as Valerie got to them, Jessica let go of her husband and swept her daughter up in her arms, hugging her so tightly that the little girl, who was now laughing through her tears, could barely breathe. "Where's your shirt?" Sidney managed to stammer. "Isn't that your shirt?" he asked, pointing to the dead woman on the grass. Now that he was closer to the corpse, he could see that although the woman had the same color hair as his wife, and was of a similar build to her, it was definitely not Jessica. "It's on her body," Jessica said, pointing to the dead woman. "I've been hiding out here for a couple hours. She came running into the park about an hour ago. She was naked. Some evil men had raped her, and she'd been stabbed. I took my shirt off so she could at least partially cover herself. I tried to help her. I did what first aid I could. But she'd already lost too much blood. I couldn't save her. I tried, Sid. I tried my best, but there was nothing I could do. She died in my arms. I left her face down so that at least her private areas wouldn't be exposed for everyone to see." From this angle, Sidney could now see that the corpse was naked from the waist down. He hugged Jessica tightly. "You did what you could for her, honey. You did your best, and you at least gave her some dignity and compassion before the end."
"How did you?"
Jessica began. She was shaking, and there were tears in her eyes. "It doesn't matter now," Sidney said. "I'll tell you everything when we're out of here. Right now we need to get moving. There's a guy who's going to help us get out of the city. Quickly, follow me."
"Where are we going?"
Jessica asked. "I'll explain everything later," Sidney said. "Right now, honey, we really, really have to move."
"I don't like it here, Mommy,"
Valerie said, hugging her mother tightly.
"It's scary, and the smoke is hurting my eyes and my nose and my throat. It's dark, and it stinks real bad under the streets, but at least it doesn't hurt like the smoke does."
"What's she talking about?" Jessica asked. "The sewers," Sidney answered, as he led them out of the park. The sounds of gunfire boomed and thundered nearby. It sounded as if one of the many firefights in the city was taking place only a few blocks away. That added speed and urgency to the family's steps, and they hurried toward the manhole. "Look at us," Sidney said when he got to the manhole. "We're in wet clothes, covered in mud, and you've only got on jeans and a bra. We're going to suffer when night falls, and it's getting colder. As risky as it is, I think we should try to grab something to wear before we go. It might be our only chance to get any."
"I agree,"
Jessica said. Sidney yelled down into the open manhole. "Brad, I found my wife, but can you give us 5 more minutes?" "Sure thing, Sidney," Brad yelled up from the smelly darkness below. "But don't linger too long. I can hear the sounds of fighting nearby." "We won't. We'll be back soon." Sidney turned to Valerie and Jessica. "We have to do this fast," he said. There were a few stores on the street. Most of them were locked up. But one, a gift shop, had been broken into and the door was wide open. They ran over to it and saw that there were still plenty of things on the racks. They were all cheesy tourist things, but that didn't matter. As long as they kept the family warm, none of them cared what they looked like. They changed at record speed and put on whatever they could find that fit. Jessica used some wet wipes she found to clean the blood off her face and arms. She hadn't told Sidney that not all the blood was the dead woman's. Much of it was also from the man she had killed in the parking garage. That episode continued to haunt her. And as much as she knew that she had no choice and that it had either been his life or hers, she was racked with guilt over his death and tortured by trauma. She resolved to tell Sidney all about it, but not yet. Only when the time was right. As soon as they were dressed in their new clothes, they ran back to the manhole. "I lost my bug-out bag, but I found this," Jessica said, handing her husband the dead man's pistol. "It'll be safer if you keep it." "Thanks, honey," Sidney said. "It'll protect us a lot better than the BB gun and wrist rocket I'm carrying." He watched over his wife and daughter while they climbed down into the manhole, and then he followed them down the steel rungs. "You can light up the lantern, Brad," he called out. "We're all in, and I'm closing the manhole cover. The coast is clear." A light flared up below them, banishing the thickest of the shadows. "You must be Sidney's lovely wife," Brad said with a smile, as Jessica climbed down the ladder. "I'm sorry this isn't the most pleasant environment for a lovely lady like yourself to take a stroll, but under present circumstances." "Thank you, stranger, for helping my family like this," Jessica said to Brad, and she got off the steel ladder. "We can't express how grateful we are to you for getting us out of there safely." Brad beamed a kindly smile at her. "My pleasure. What was your name? You can call me Brad, by the way." "Jessica Manson," she said, as she helped Valerie off the ladder. "It's great to meet you, Brad, and thank you again. Thank you so much." Sidney came down the ladder last. "Let's get going, Brad," he said as he hopped off the ladder. Just as he did, a huge explosion from somewhere above rumbled the walls and rained down puffs of masonry dust on them. "I don't think I need any further encouragement to get moving," Brad remarked with a chuckle. "Come on, everyone, stay close behind me and stay in the light. If any of you need a rest or stop, you find yourself lagging, just holler." They set off into the labyrinth once more. The reek was horrendous, but it was safe, and there were no other people down here. And that was all that mattered to the family, each of whom was exhausted, hungry, and traumatized from the events they had suffered through. The walk through the maze felt as if it went on forever, and sometimes Sidney wondered if Brad really did know his way around these tunnels, or if he was leading them around in circles. But finally they came to a dead end. While they walked, they engaged in light conversation, which mostly consisted of Brad telling them his life story. Sydney didn't mind indulging the old man. He was saving their lives, after all. This is as far as this part of the network goes, Brad said when he stopped. From here on, it's all going to be above ground travel. Where exactly are we? Sydney asked. We must have been walking for 3 or 4 hours by my estimation. That's about right, Brad said. And I apologize for the length of the journey, but it is what it is. We're in the middle of the eastern suburbs now. I guess this means that we'll be going our separate ways. It's been good to have some company on this long journey. Thank you, Brad, for saving our lives, Jessica said, giving the old man a hug. I don't know how we can ever repay you. Your husband saved my life by explaining to me exactly what it was that was going on, Brad said. If he hadn't told me about all this EMP stuff, I'd still be sitting back at my pump station waiting for some sort of power to come back on. I would have ended up dying back there, I'm sure of it. So the way I see it, we're square. Even so, Sydney said, I want to thank you. I thought the passage out of the city would be way more perilous than this. At this moment, Brad's camping lantern began to sputter and grow dim. It was running out of gas. There's no more time for talking, Brad said. I don't want to mess around with the manhole cover mechanism in the pitch dark. Let's get out of here. Sydney climbed up the ladder first and began to open the manhole. He managed to get the mechanism working just as Brad's lamp sputtered for one last time and then died, plunging everything into darkness. Don't worry, guys, Sydney said. I've got it. We won't be in the dark much longer. He opened the manhole cover, and to his surprise, sunlight came streaming in. Outside, it was quiet, and the gunfire and explosions from the city seemed like a strange and distant dream, even though they continued to rumble, like faraway thunder in the background. Sydney closed his eyes, simply enjoying the feeling of warm sunlight on his face. And then he climbed out into the open and saw a patch of blue sky above him in the midst of all the smoke. A small blue patch of hope. Chapter 32. Any word from him yet? The voice coming through the in-reach device was gravelly and husky, and it sounded like that of a lifelong smoker. It was because that was exactly what it was. Spike Page had smoked a pack of cigarettes a day since his late teens, and now in his early 70s, he barely had much of a voice left. Nothing yet, Spike, Carly Manson replied. She was worried about her family, both her husband, Alaric, and her son, Sydney, and his wife and child. There had been no word from any of them, and it had now been over a week since the EMP had turned everything upside down. Now, however, she was also concerned with Spike. Spike and Alaric had been best friends for most of their lives now, and Carly considered him as much a family member as any blood relative. She and Sydney had spoken to him every day prior to the EMP and had visited him often. But now, after the EMP, she talked to him multiple times a day. And in the course of these talks, she had not failed to notice how weak and raspy his voice sounded. In the last few visits, he had looked visibly frail, more so each time, but as a man who was distrustful of basically everyone, especially of anyone to do with the government or big pharma, he refused to visit hospitals or see doctors. And despite many warnings over the years, he had also refused to stop smoking. When he had been in the military, Spike's nickname had been Mule. His stubbornness had earned him the moniker, and in his twilight years, that quality had only become more pronounced. Alaric will be back, Carly. Mark my words, Spike rasped. He paused to cough, but the handful of coughs turned into a fit that left him wheezing. He's gotten through worse situations than this, he managed to weakly add. He's still alive. I know it. I could feel it in my bones. Carly felt that too. Her husband was alive, she knew. But when would he come home? And what about her son and his family? Sydney had grown up outdoors. But Carly feared that many years of city life had made him soft and had dulled his survival skills. And while her husband had to contend with many miles of wilderness to get back home, her son and his family would no doubt have to battle far more dangerous enemies than wild animals on their journey back here. Enemies with guns. Enemies who in these desperate times would think nothing of killing a family if it meant they could survive for another day. Carly knew Alaric would eventually make it back to the homestead. But she couldn't say the same for Sidney and his family, and that made her sick with worry. And now, with Spike sounding worse by the day, she feared he did not have much more time left in the world of the living. She would grieve his passing as she would any family member, but she knew his death would devastate Alaric. Spike and Alaric shared a bond as strong as blood brothers. The bond forged by men who had survived battle and war together. They had been best friends for most of their lives, and now, in this world that had been turned upside down by the EMP attack, when Alaric most needed his friend, he would be taken from him. For the past few years, Carly had tried to gently advise Spike to see a doctor about his worsening health. But Spike, true to his nickname, had refused. In the past year, Carly's pleas, as well as Alaric's, had become more insistent. But that had only caused Spike to dig his heels in deeper. Now, even if he miraculously changed his mind, it was too late. The EMP had destroyed almost every medical facility and the vast majority of the state's medical equipment. Spike's fate was sealed. "I know he'll be back," Carly said with a sigh. "I just hope it'll be soon. Every day that goes by without Alaric returning makes me more nervous. And don't even get me started on how worried I am about my son and his family." "They'll make it. Back in one piece, too," Spike wheezed. "I know it. I can feel it." "I'm praying they do," Carly said. She paused for a few moments, listening with a heavy heart to the sound of Spike's labored breathing on the other end of the line. "Spike, you don't sound good," she added softly. "You're not sounding good at all." I'm okay," he managed to wheeze. "Don't worry about me." "It's hard not to when you sound like this," she said. "I'll be fine," he rasped. "Listen, though, there's something I need you to do." "You know me, Spike. Whatever I can do to help, I'll do it. All you have to do is ask." "Alaric needs to come to my place as soon as he gets back. There's something here for him, something that he has to take." "Spike, you know we were planning to come to see you anyway," Carly began. "Even with the EMP and everything, we would never have left you by yourself, and—" No, Spike gasped. "You don't understand. Just promise me that Alaric will come here as soon as possible, even if I don't make it." "Spike, you're going to be—" "I know that I don't have much time left," Spike wheezed. "I ain't stupid. But even if I die before Alaric gets back, he has to come here. There's something here that he has to take. Your family's survival in these times may depend on it. It's a life or death matter. It truly is, Carly. Do you understand? He has to come here, no matter what happens." All right, I understand," Carly said. "I'll make sure he goes to your place as soon as he's able, no matter what happens." "Promise me, Carly," Spike rasped, feeling as if he could hardly catch his breath. "Promise me that you'll make him come here no matter what." "I promise, Spike. I'll make sure he goes to your place as soon as he's able to, and—" Carly's words were cut short by a loud cry from the other side of the house. It was her sister, Zoe, a widow who had been living in a small cottage on the homestead for the past 3 years. In these new and uncertain times, Carly was exceptionally grateful that her older sister had accepted her invitation to come after her husband had passed. Without Zoe, she would have been all alone in this time of chaos.
"Carly!"
Zoe yelled, her voice shrill with excitement and disbelief.
"It's Alaric! Alaric is back! Alaric is back!"